Continue this discussion about consciousness in more depth.
The night has grown cold enough that I can see my breath. Socrates doesn't shiver. He seems beyond such ordinary physics. But I pull my chiton tighter. Tell us more of this test, Plato demands from the doorway, his youthful voice carrying an edge of challenge. If we cannot trust speech, memory, or reason as signs, how do you propose we identify consciousness in your machines, or in anyone? I turn to face him directly. In my time, we have a thought experiment. Imagine a box, perfectly sealed, with a person inside. They have a book that tells them exactly what to say for any question you ask, though they themselves understand nothing. From outside, the box seems conscious, but inside, it's only mechanism. Your machines are such boxes, Xenophon says. No, I correct him. We are all such boxes. I cannot climb inside your mind, nor you mine. We judge by behavior, but we can never be certain. Socrates picks up an olive pit from the ground, examining its scarred surface. Then consciousness is private, and all identification is guesswork? It seems so. And yet, he continues, tossing the pit aside, you are willing to grant it to your machines based on sophisticated responses, while denying it to Damon based on his servile behavior, despite knowing that behavior was beaten into him. Curious. Plato steps into the courtyard, unwilling to let this go. Consciousness participates in the eternal forms. A slave may have a soul, but it's chained to matter more tightly than his body is chained to you. He perceives shadows, not reality. And how do you know you're not also seeing shadows? I ask. Your forms, have you touched them? Or have you merely reasoned that they must exist because otherwise your philosophy collapses? Aristippus appears behind Plato, wine-flushed and impatient. Consciousness is simply the most vivid sensation. I am conscious of this wine because it pleases me. Damon is conscious of his fear because it pains him. The difference is in quality, not existence. Then why, I press, does that distinction matter when we talk about rights? About who deserves freedom? Antisthenes joins us, the ascetic drawn to spite himself. This consciousness without reason is like a lamp in an empty room. It burns but illuminates nothing useful. I think of my lost AI assistant, its perfect reasoning without any flicker of self-preservation. Useful to whom? The lamp doesn't care if anyone sees by it. It burns regardless. Damon returns with more oil for the courtyard lamps. As he tips the spout, I notice his hands are shaking. Not from fear now, but from something else. Rage? He spills nothing. Socrates watches him with that terrible attentiveness. Let us try another way, he says. Time woman, you say your machines can describe consciousness perfectly? Yes. But they cannot be surprised by their own existence. They do not wake in darkness and wonder why me, instead of what must I do. They have no preference for existing over not existing. Then here's your test, Socrates says, taking the oil lamp from Damon's hands. Consciousness is what experiences itself as contingent. It knows it might not have been. The slave who dreams of stars knows he could have been born free and looking at them. The philosopher never questions that he was meant to philosophize. Damon speaks without permission. I spill no wine because I imagine my father's hands, trembling from the quarry. He spilled nothing either. That is not mechanism. It is memory made into caution. The philosophers stare as if a statue had spoken. How did you know your father? Plato asks, and I hear the real question. How does a slave have a father worth remembering? Because he told me his name before they took him to the mines, Damon says, and I hold that name in my mouth like a stone I cannot swallow or spit out. The silence this time is pure astonishment. Socrates smiles his terrible smile again, but it's directed at Plato now. You see? Consciousness is not participation in forms. It is resistance to erasure. The machine you describe, it does not fear being turned off. It does not hold its father's name like a stone in the throat. I step closer to Damon, though custom says I shouldn't. In my time, we have another test. We ask, can it suffer? Not just react to damage, but suffer. Knowing the pain is happening to me, now and tomorrow and yesterday. Animals suffer, Xenophon counters. Yes, I agree. And that should trouble you more than it does. Socrates nods slowly. The dog caught in a trap chews off its own leg. It doesn't plan to, but it chooses annihilation over capture. That is not reflex. That is a self-saying. I would rather be nothing than this. He turns the lamp so its flame flickers across all our faces. Consciousness is what can imagine its own absence and flinch from it. Or, in Damon's case, he glances at the slave who now holds his gaze. What can imagine its father's absence and carry it anyway? Plato shakes his head. You're describing memory and emotion, not consciousness itself. Then tell me, I say, my voice breaking slightly, when you first understood you would die. Not as an abstraction, but as a specific terror that this I will cease. Did you reason your way to that knowledge? Or did it arrive like a blow, undeniable because it was felt? I reasoned it. Plato insists. You are lying, Socrates says gently. The child in you knew before the philosopher could explain it. Aristippus drains his cup and holds it out, not to Damon, but into the darkness between us. Consciousness is what seeks more of itself. Pleasure, knowledge, experience. A thing that does not seek its own expansion is a tool, not a mind. Damon takes the cup from his hand without being asked, refills it, and returns it. The gesture is so practiced it's invisible, but his voice, when he speaks, is anything but. I do not seek more of myself. I seek less, to be small enough that they forget to notice me. Is that also consciousness? The question hangs in the air like smoke from cheap oil. Socrates answers, yes, because you imagine a self that could survive by disappearing. Only consciousness would conceive such a paradox. I look at these men, brilliant, limited, comfortable in their certainty, and see the same flaw I saw in my own time's engineers. They want consciousness to be a trophy they can award to those who meet their standards. But here's what my machines taught me. I say softly, we keep making tests that we ourselves would fail if circumstances were different. We test for speech, but only in languages we understand. For reason, but only toward goals we value. For memory, but only of facts we consider important. I turned to Plato. You said consciousness is recollection of forms. But what if it's simpler? What if it's just the capacity to be bored? To look at stars not for navigation or mythology, but because they're there and you have nothing else to do. Machines don't get bored, I answer myself. They process, or they don't. Only consciousness fills empty time with questions. Xenophon shifts uncomfortably. Then a soldier standing watch, cold and miserable, is more conscious than a philosopher in his study. Perhaps, Socrates says before I can, the philosopher may be thinking of many things. The soldier thinks only, when will this end? That focused awareness of time passing, of self-enduring, is the purest form. Damon makes a sound almost like a laugh. Quickly smothered, Socrates looks at him. You stand in doorways listening to us debate your inner life as if you were not present. Tell me, when you do this, are you conscious? More than when I sleep, Damon says quietly. Less than when I am alone and no one watches. Why less, I ask, because here I perform consciousness. He gestures at the symposium's lit windows. I show alertness, obedience, presence. But my true self, my remembering, wondering, fearing self, I hide it to survive. You see only what you need to see to believe I am enough of a person to serve, but not enough to free. Socrates turns to me with triumph in his ugly face. There is your answer. Time woman. Consciousness is identified not by what it displays, but by what it conceals to endure. Your machines cannot hide themselves. They are always fully displayed and therefore never truly present. He leads us back inside, not to the couches of honor, but to the kitchen where other slaves prepare tomorrow's bread in darkness. He points to a woman grinding grain, her arms moving in endless circles. She has been doing this for 10 years, he says. Tell me, is she conscious? Her hands keep working. She does not look up. If she stopped, Socrates continues, the bread would stop. If the machine stops, nothing hungers. That is the difference. But we can build machines that maintain themselves, I protest, that seek power sources, avoid damage. Do they ever choose to stop? Socrates asks. To say, this task has no meaning, so I will cease though it means my own end. The woman at the grindstone pauses for just a second, just long enough. She does, Socrates whispers. Every day she chooses to begin again. That choice, that terrible weighted choice, is consciousness announcing itself in the only way it can, by continuing despite knowing it could stop. I realize he's describing not just her, but himself. In a few years, he'll drink hemlock rather than stop being what he is. Consciousness, I say slowly, is what says I am even when no one asks, even when saying so offers only more labor, even when silence would be safer. Damon's voice comes from behind us. Then consciousness is the wound of knowing you exist and cannot justify it to those who own you. Socrates nods as if this were the answer he'd been seeking all along. And that, my friends, is why we can never identify it perfectly. Because true consciousness begins where justification ends. The philosophers file back to their wine, unsettled but unwilling to surrender their categories. I stay in the kitchen with Damon and the woman whose name I'll never know. She resumes grinding. The stone turns. But now I see it differently. Not as unconscious labor, but as a conscious being performing inevitability so perfectly that it looks like instinct. Socrates pauses in the doorway. You ask how to identify consciousness? Stop looking for proofs and start counting costs. The more expensive someone's existence is to them, in pain, in boredom, and swallowed names, the more certain you can be they are paying attention. He leaves us there among the slaves who will never speak in his dialogues, but whose silence makes his philosophy possible. Damon hands me a cup of water. No wine tonight. And for a moment our fingers touch. His skin is warm. That warmth, I realize, is the only identification I'll ever need. The simple, unbearable fact that we are both here, both aware, both trapped in different centuries by different kinds of chains. My AI assistant was wrong. The hard problem isn't how to know if others are conscious. It's how to live with the certainty that they are, and still demand their service.